everybody. So when dealing with the rubric, what you're mainly looking for is for categories for this superior category to make sure your features fall into this line. And if any of these statements in the satisfactory or unacceptable category are true, then you will fall into this category. Now for the hints, we do offer hints on each of the lab tasks. Some stuff you will have to look up. Other stuff is going to be relating to the assignments. Okay, it's going to be pretty much a mix of the two things. So the concepts you learned from following along in the documentation could be easily applied to other things. So arrow movements, you guys added stuff to the project settings for input. This is just adding some more functionality to that. Health pickups are going to be similar to the way that the max ammo pickup works, but instead of modifying max health, you're going to have to set current health to max there. 1D blend space, you will absolutely have to look that up. It is not covered anywhere in the documentation, but they do have a pretty good walkthrough in the third-person template or implementation of the third-person template, and then use the Unreal documentation to fill in any of the blanks that you might have. Attacking should stop the movement. We did this for the reloading. You'll do something similar to the attacking, but there is like an extra step that you have to take. And you want to look at your animation system when dealing with this for that last step. It is, kind of give you a hint without giving you the answer. Just take a look at when the attack finishes, if that helps. All right, so when the base character dies, it will drop a pickup. This is referring to all the pickups that you create, plus any other pickups that you might add later on, like the health pickup and so on and so forth. So this is pretty straightforward. You have character death already done through the documentation. You just need to add an additional function to spawn pickups at the player's location, and it will be random which pickup. So the hint is the weapon and animation syncing. So look over that documentation for hints on how to get this done. Blending the health bar is pretty straightforward. It says to look at the math map in the content examples. It is easy to blend two things together. You may have to do some documentation lookup as well for that. Adding shields is pretty straightforward. It's just like the health system. In fact, you're going to add shields to the current health system and not create a new actor component. You don't want to create a new actor component for the shields. Just use the killable component that we already set up, and you're pretty much following along with that, including the HUD, the widget HUD. You'll be adding a bar for that as well, and binding just like you did with the health. And then the gun model is pretty straightforward. Adding the gun model, replacing the animations in the animation system for the gun. The only thing that I would recommend you do here is look up how to attach a weapon. I would specifically Google search the attaching something in Unreal Engine 4 to another blueprint. So that should get you started and pointed in the right direction. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I remember. I think I was looking over this morning, and the like you said, a lot of these seem pretty straightforward. Like adding movement arrows doesn't seem too difficult, and the health pickup doesn't seem too hard. But I'm still trying to figure out the shield. But I'm looking forward to figuring it out.
Yeah, the idea behind this is that you have all the basic knowledge on how to get this stuff done. Now we're just doing a little bit of research component mixed in with applying. So it's like reading comprehension plus a little bit of research mixed in together from the assignments and research.
All right, that's good for me.
Sure. All right, so moving on, any other questions that you all might have relating to the assignments or stuff that you are just unsure of how to do in Unreal Engine that I could show you? Hello, Samantha. Anything at all? All right, well, let's do something while we have you guys here. Let's talk about debugging in Unreal Engine. Since you guys aren't super familiar with Unreal, I figured debugging would be a great start for learning the intricacies of the engine. So while I wait for the project to come up, is there any questions at all that you guys have about PGF2 or the assignments that I could answer? Should be any minute now.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
About the project thumbnail.
About what?
Every time I load my screen, it goes to it doesn't show my level.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty
yeah,
easy.
and then I go to a project, it just says a project thumbnail is at default.
Okay. So are you dealing with inside of Unreal?
Yes.
Okay, so to get your default level, you want to go to the project settings. So go to
Not the default level. I'm talking about the project thumbnail. When you open up Unreal and you see the project, in the beginning it'll show a thumbnail of a screenshot of your project. Mine just go to a default of a Unity with a circle on.
Okay, so are you talking about this in the library?
Yes, those pictures. Mine's like on the grading 423.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
It's perfectly fine as is here. No thumbnail needs to be here for the project. It's just there for you to quickly identify what your projects are doing. But it's perfectly all right if it's just like this.
Okay, I was trying to figure out how to change.
Yeah, I think it's just Unreal decides what the thumbnail is going to be. I don't think you set that anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so Stephanie has a question. When creating the weapon chute, the opponent dummy, how would we know the weapon has took effect? Okay, I'm not quite understanding the question. Can you possibly reword that?
I think I actually get what they're saying. I think they're curious to know if when the weapon shoots the dummy, how do they know that damage has been dealt?
Ah, okay. All right. So early on in the assignments, you'll not have any indication of the other enemy taking damage. Okay, but later on, you will. Okay, so this is assignment 4. This is a finalized version. So when you get to, I think, assignment 3, you'll implement the hurt. So you'll play a hurt animation when the player takes damage. So when you do shoot somebody, you'll see them flinch a little bit there. That will get implemented in assignment 3. So you won't see it now. What you could do is print that stuff to the screen. So let me show you how to do that. So we can go into the base character and we can find our event for shooting. So in your case, it would be like input action attack, and then there would be some other event, possibly even this on ready to fire. What you can do is just say, drag off of the beginning of the event and just do a print string here. And you can say, something like projectile fired, right? Just so you know that a projectile was spawned into the world. And then we can go into our killable component over here. And right before we take damage, if we wanted to, we can just drag off our take damage event, do another print string. And then what we can do is do an append node here. So append with nd, append. So we're going to take our, I turned off context sensitivity so I could find this append node because I was dealing with the float and it wouldn't automatically connect the two. But if you find the append string node, so let me show you that again. So I drug off damage. With context sensitivity on, if I do a append, it's not going to find it. But if I turn it off, it's looking for a string version here down at the bottom. So any variable you can pretty much do an append node on, and what it's going to do is I'm just going to combine basically two strings together here. So the first one is the damage number, and then we'll do like a colon, a space, a colon, another space, and damage amount there, if I can spell. And then I'm just going to plug that directly into our print string node there, so that when I come in, I know how much damage is coming in. And if I wanted to, over here at the end, I can just drag off of that and do a print string here. And pass in the current health. I could even do another append node. And I'm going to hit Alt on that and connect the bottom, and we'll just say current health colon space. And then that gets passed into our print string. All right, so print string is a great way to debug your code, right? It's a great way to put information on the screen while you're playing. So I highly recommend that you do that. That's a great way to debug. So now when I fire, you can see up in the top left, the projectile did fire. Let me go ahead and change the color of that so you can see that a little bit better. Nice and red. And we'll do the same thing for the killable. Red there and red there. Okay, and then compile, Control-Shift-S to save everything, and then hit play. And now when I fire, we can see projectiles fired. And then we hit play, we can see we did 1 damage, and our current health of that character is dropping. So we can see that. So that's a good way to do it. All right, so does that kind of answer your question, Stephanie, on seeing damage done to the other enemy, the opponent? Cool, awesome. Let me show you some other debugging techniques. All right, so if I wanted to look at all the values of a function or event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a breakpoint, right? So I right-click the node, and down towards the bottom, there are breakpoint options. Now, you should be familiar with breakpoints from Visual Studio to debug your code. Basically, what it does is just going to stop the code executing at that current node. So when I do hit something, and it does take damage, as you can see, the screen grays out, everything pauses. In fact, I don't have my mouse, so I had to hit Shift F1 to get my mouse back. And then what I can do is go over to my event graph, wherever that breakpoint was at, and we can see a giant arrow showing us where we're at in code. Okay, so I can use these debugging tools up here in order to do that. Now, if the breakpoint does not trigger, the problem is going to be the debug filter. Okay, so no matter how many times you shoot at the other enemy, it never triggers this breakpoint. What you want to do is make sure that you select the right character in the drop down. And you may have to test this a couple of times, but luckily we selected the correct one. It'll show you all of the stuff in the level that has a killable component. And typically, anything that gets created at runtime, so like the player, is going to be found at the bottom. So this base character down here at the bottom is the player character. And I'll show you that here in just a second. But right now, I have selected the other base character because there's only two. There's the one that I placed and then the one that spawns in. So I'm going to make sure I have the one that's placed. And then what I can do is try again. So if it doesn't trigger that time, then select something else in the debug filter until it does trigger. All right. And then if you selected everything in the debug filter and it never triggers, that means this code is not executing, which means that's not being called. And if it's not being called, then you want to check out this bind event here, where this event gets invoked. So anytime that damage gets dealt, it sends out this event or a notification to run this event, and if it is the object, it's going to run that event. So let's talk about navigating around. So as you enter the node, you can hover over stuff and take a look at the damage values. But as you can see right now, it's 0 and none. Yeah, that's not going to help you out. What you want to do is, if you're going to investigate this node, you need to go to the next node. So once it comes over here, that means this node was executed, and that means all of the damage values or anything that's being passed in is then actually pulling that information into these pins, okay? So once you get to the next node, then you can look at the pins of the previous node. So we can see now that damage is 1. The actor that we are damaging is base character _2. Damage type is default if you had damage types. We don't have any. Instigated by the player controller, so the player did this, and it was a base projectile that caused some damage. We can get information that way, and then you can use these step overs to execute from wherever these execution lines are connected. Every time it goes to a node, that's where it's going to stop. It's going to pass all of these other nodes because they don't have execution wires connected to them. Right? But we can still, once we get over to the next node, we can then go in and take a look at all the values and see what's actually happening to the damage. And we can look at it and we can do our investigation on the values and to make sure that those are what we expect them to be. Okay. We're going to step over to our print string, and then we're going to go to our branch. Once we're on our branch, we can look at the value of our condition, and then we can step over and just to verify that, okay, that was true, and it did actually go to the true, so we can see that this on hurt is getting called. Now, this will exist in your code, but the animation part of it is not coming until next assignment. So if you put a breakpoint right here, it will only execute this line or this node, or the breakpoint will only trigger on this node, but then you'll know for sure that the damage is getting hit. And then if you're not doing any damage, what you can do is just come over here and check all the values to make sure that, one, the damage that's coming into the take damage event is actually something other than 0, because the damage of 0 is not going to do anything, right? Positive damage will we will subtract from health, and then you can take in negative damage, so just be aware of that. So I hope that helps with debugging. Anybody have any questions about debugging? Oh yeah, I wanted to show you the selecting the components. So let me do that. I'm gonna hit just play from here, and then I'm gonna go take some damage as a player. And as you can see here, it did trigger, and it is selecting the bottom killable component. Now, luckily, it automatically knew which one I wanted and tried to select the right one. Okay, so sometimes it'll auto select, sometimes it won't. Just be aware that if you're not triggering breakpoints, odds are you don't have the right thing selected in the debug flow. All right. So
if it's all right, I do have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
When I was working on assignment 2, actually, thankfully, this section yesterday, and I found that whenever I entered the fire, I just immediately died. I don't know if that's, I didn't take any damage. As soon as I hit the fire, I died. I know that that was something that was supposed to be tested in assignment 2, but I was never able to sort of get it to a point where just standing in the fire did constant damage or just didn't kill me right away. Is that the intention? Just the fire is an immediately killable pickup?
So this is the damage pickup right here. And what we're going to be looking at here is our base damage for enter pickup. So we want to make sure that we have a positive value here. But if it's set to like 5, the max health in the killable component is 5. So if you set the damage to 5,
Oh, I see.
and there's only 5 health, you're going to die right away. So if you set it to like something like a 1 or, excuse me, a 1 or a 2.5 or something other than all of the health, you know, then you won't die right away. Now, if you want to do damage over time, what you're going to have to do is change the way this function works. You would have to set up something to let you know that you entered the pickup and something to let you know that you exited the pickup. And then if you have entered the pickup, so like if you have entered the pickup, true, then apply damage. And you'll take this and you'll multiply that by the amount that you want to damage, and then pass that into the base damage.
Okay, I see. So it'd just be about letting both the pickup and the player know where the player is, basically. Like, are you in the pickup collider area or not, and whether or not to apply that damage.
Right. Correct.
Okay. Would that be allowed for assignment 2, or is that something that's a little out of the wheelhouse?
You're absolutely allowed to do damage over time. Now, as long as it still functions, as long as I still walk into the fire and take damage, then you'll get 100% for that. Okay. So you can add as much functionality to these assignments as you want. However, the stuff that we're going to grade you on should function according to the rubric. Okay.
All right. Awesome.
It should. So the question is, the fire on the ground there, will it automatically affect the health? So in the damage pickup, we have this enter pickup function that's overloaded from our base pickup class here that we derive from. So when we call apply damage, our killable component is looking for that on this on take any damage. What was apply damage called is what it's saying. And because we're binding right here to this create event, and we call this take damage down here, I'm basically saying that these two nodes are connected, right? So when this, when that take damage gets, or the apply damage is called, it's going to, this node is going to look for that. And then if it triggers, then it's going to call this, and it's going to take all that information from that apply damage and pass it here. So if you have this apply damage and the damage is anything other than 0, then yes, it will automatically affect the health if you implemented the this bind and this take damage event. You're welcome. So let's look at some other debugging stuff you can do. So if you go to the window drop down, under developer tools, there is a blueprint debugger. And what you can do with this is, it doesn't tell you a whole lot when you're not running the game. It tries to tell you where you currently are. Let me drag that up a little bit. So in the call stack, this is where I'm currently looking at. And if I were to back up, it would show me where that stuff is. But if we hit play, and then we go trigger our breakpoint, we get a whole lot of awesome information in our call stack. It tells us where we are. So right now we're in the call stack, and we can double click anything in the call stack to go to that node. Anything that's like native code that you see here is referring to C++ code. So they even tell you over here in the languages, C++ code. But anything that you yourself have authored will most likely show up in this white text, and it will say blueprints. So just be aware that if you don't see some code, don't worry, that's just Unreal Engine code that's running in the background. And odds are it's not going to affect whether you're, or it's not going to affect your project because odds are it's not throwing an error, right? The error will most likely be in your code, so in one of these nodes, right? So let's look at it, execution flow. It works similar the same way to the call stack, but it's really looking node to node. So if I were to step over a couple of times, right, we can see that take damage, went to a print string, and now we're currently on our set health node. So this is a node to node execution flow. And it even tells you how many milliseconds it was there. Because we're debugging, these values aren't exactly correct, but you get the point there. But that's pretty cool. And then it also has some debugging tools here for you. And the really cool thing is the watch window. So at any point in time, I can come to a value. So either a specific variable or a return value I wanted to watch. I could do that. Anything that's passed in. So as I'm triggered on a breakpoint, I will get all this information relating to the node. So if I were to like step over, or as you can see, it'll run. So let me hit just resume again, and then we'll take some more damage, and then we'll step over, and then as you can see here, when you're watching a value, it prints it right into the event graph, which is great. So then you basically have a way to, like, at a glance, when I'm breakpoint, instead of doing these print strings here, I can just add those values to a watch, and it'll show me every time I execute that event, those values. And so these over here are referring to the last time it ran. Then you step over, and as you can see, those values get updated. So pretty cool. You see if there's anything else. Oh, finding blueprints. This is super useful for looking for stuff in your engine. So when you do the window finding blueprints, it'll search the entire project. So we can do things like look for all of our print string functions if we wanted to, and it'll show me everywhere in the project that has a print string. But if you were in, let's say, here, and you do a find the results in a blueprint using the window that's down there, it's only going to show me the print strings that are currently related to this blueprint. So when you do when you get a whole tab of finding blueprints, it's going to search the entire project, and it'll even tell you where those print strings are located. Okay, and you're just looking for things that you authored yourself. So like the killable here, the base character. I have no idea what this is. I didn't write it, so it wouldn't be a print string there or an error there. Again, I didn't write that, didn't write that. W main menu, there's one there that we wrote. This is the level blueprint. Art tools, now again, we didn't write this, so don't worry about that. Datasmith content, yeah, I don't know what that's located, what those are referring to. So, but you'll see game, anything that's in the game folder is most likely related to something that you yourself authored. All right, and that's pretty much debugging in a nutshell. Some really powerful tools, but the only real way you're going to get good at debugging in Unreal Engine is to do it yourself and to practice. See how this stuff works. But it doesn't always work. As you can see here, we are watching these values and it's not showing up in the watches window. It's probably just some background resource thing allocation, or it could be a bug somewhere in Unreal. But typically those would show up down here. I don't know why they disappeared. But yeah, there they go, back again. Strange. Anyways, any questions, comments, concerns? That's pretty much all I had to show you guys today. Jason says, compile and save error. What do you mean?
Sometimes when I compile and save, and I go back, it'll say the previous have not been saved, and then you have to reload it.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
So when you go to compile, and like you're closed out of a system?
Yeah, close out the system. When I try to load up the assignments and I open back up the system.
And it's like this thing that pops up down here at the bottom right. So
yeah,
would you like to reload? Typically, you do not want to reload any of the assets that it asks you to reload. And the reason you don't want to do that is because there could be an error in there, and by you opening it up, it could potentially crash Unreal Engine. So what you would want to do is just go to the places that you want to modify yourself, as opposed to auto reloading all the assets.
Okay.
Yeah, just do it manually. It's much better that way.
Because I was always wondering, you always say, get loaded, please retry again. And then it'll go to 100%, but it won't save the scene.
Yep. And just in case that you guys aren't aware, next to the compile button is this drop down for save on compile. Make sure that you have it selected on success only. That way, whenever you compile, it'll automatically save that blueprint. And that is dependent on the project. So every new project you create, you got to make sure that that is set. Otherwise, it'll just compile, which is perfectly fine with it not saving. But if you just compiled the blueprint, then went to another blueprint, ran into a crash, and Unreal closed down, you just lost all that work that didn't get saved. So make sure you do have that save on compile on success only, so that when the blueprint successfully compiles, it'll automatically save for you.
What about the art? Because they don't have compiles on the art. You just have save on it.
So like the widgets and stuff?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah,
like the AC attack, you don't have compile, you only have save on that, on the animation.
Okay, so yeah, there's just a save button here for the AC attack. There's no compile. So you're gonna wanna just hit the save button. But if you go to the blueprint, the animation blueprint, there is a compile button with the compile on save. But whenever you're in a specific animation, you have to actually hit the save button. So any modifications you ever make to like AC attack, or later on when you do the animation montages, or any of these other animations that you're currently working on, if you do make a change, like add stuff to it, make sure you do hit that save button for that animation if you want those changes to apply to the base character. Another thing to note about the animation blueprint is this is a good example of what not to do. So I'm not working on any of this stuff, so I want to make sure that all this stuff is closed out. So let's say I accidentally close everything out. What I can do is come over here to my blueprint tab, I can double click on the event graph and the anim graph to get those up and running. Okay, so make sure if you're not working on something in here in your animation blueprint, you just close out of the tabs, because if you do something like, let's say you have the anim graph up and running, and then you have the motion graph up and running, and then you have, let's say, an idle to run, all that, you're basically instancing every single one of these tabs is open to the anim graph, as you can see here, okay? Now, when I go to save this asset, potentially Unreal could run into an issue on which anim graph do I want to save? Do I want to save, or which one of these do I want to save first? And then it doesn't know what to do, so it tries to save all of them, and then ends up corrupting your blueprint. So, like I said, just close out of that stuff if you're not working on it. Only have your event graph and your anim graph open. Only one instance of those tabs open. And you will save so much of a headache of the animation system being a corrupted blueprint and you having to spend a couple hours trying to fix it. So save yourself the headache and make sure that you only have open what you need open. Awesome.
Thanks.
Yep, my pleasure. All right. Any other comments, questions, concerns that you guys might have about Unreal Engine before we call it for today? Awesome. Well, that's all I have for you. So thank you all for showing up and asking questions. I really appreciate it. We'll go ahead and stop the recording.